All right, y'all, welcome back to Common Arms channel. Okay, today we're doing our first gun review. Now, I've been wanting to get into gun reviews for a while. I mean, I'm just really passionate about guns. I've shot a lot of guns, either in the military realm and also in the civilian realm as well. And as I'm sort of acquiring and just testing out different guns, I like to compare them with other stuff that I like and don't like. So that's kind of how we're going to be approaching these sorts of videos. Now, as far as my background with firearms initially, honestly, I started off with firearms just playing Call of Duty. I ended up moving into airsoft, kind of like a gateway drug. Bruh. And then when I was able to actually join the military, I started shooting a bunch of different weapons. I was Marine infantry and Army infantry, so pretty much the whole gambit of I guess our nation's infantry weapons, I was able to get some exposure to. And then of course, I was able to eventually buy my own firearms, and that's kind of where we are today. So today we're going to be checking out the Desert Tech MDRX. So I've had this particular rifle for, I'd say, about 6 months now. This is kind of like my primary setup, if you will. Well, I'm still trying to determine that, and we'll kind of get into that in a little bit. Now, of course, for these reviews, I think you need a significant amount of rounds to be able to actually get a good appreciation for how the rifle or the firearm actually functions and its reliability and everything. With this one, it's a little bit of a lower round count, about 1,500 rounds, but I will say I have put it through its paces in a bunch of different sorts of weather or conditions. So low lights, no lights, of course, during the day. I've shot it in the rain, in the sun, in the mountains in general. So I think I have a good sort of understanding on how this thing excels in certain conditions and how it doesn't necessarily excel in certain conditions. And we'll kind of talk about that. But what I want to do is kind of give an overall background for what I understand about the manufacturer and the firearm itself, and then move more into the features, move into the actual build quality, because that's pretty important, and kind of talk about the value as well with the cost of the firearm. And then from there, I want to go into more of the reliability and also the mobility, and just I think it's benefited uses, or what I think this thing would excel at and what it wouldn't necessarily excel at. So starting off with the manufacturer, I don't know a whole lot about Desert Tech. From my understanding, I thought they were a pretty new company, and I think, you know, in the grand scheme of firearms, they are a pretty new company, but they have been around for a while. Previously, they had the Desert Tech MDR, which is, you know, basically the previous iteration of this particular rifle. Desert Tech in general, I mean, I know I followed their social media. They're very non-politically correct, which I kind of appreciate that in some regard, because they are just passionate about what they're doing. It's about firearms. They're not really trying to appease anything else besides, you know, the people who are going to be purchasing and using their firearms. So it's a very down to business kind of mentality from what I've seen. And if you guys have any different sorts of opinions based on your own experience, definitely let me know down in the comment section. But as far as the rifle itself, I would say with the MDRX, general usage, I mean, this thing it's pretty much good for any sort of general CQB or combat sort of elements. Now, with my background coming from the Marine Corps specifically, we started off with the M16A4, very long rifle. I mean, it was a tack driver. That thing was freaking insanely smooth, insanely accurate. However, it wasn't like that conducive for sort of like CQB or urban operations. We did eventually get the M4 and then also the M27s. M4 was a little bit better, but again, like when you're talking about a bullpup, it's really hard to kind of compare, because with this, we have a 16-inch barrel, which is great, especially for the civilian market. You got a 16-inch barrel, so you're not pissing off the ATF. But again, like it's such a small package, and I'll compare it with my M16 here in a little bit. But this is an incredibly compact rifle for having that length of barrel. Even with the suppressor on, I mean, we have just this small table here, and it pretty much is the length of this table, which is, it's great, especially for CQB. Being able to have a suppressor and still have a relatively short firearm is great. And especially with that 16-inch barrel, you can really reach out and touch somebody. I haven't really shot this thing past, I don't know, maybe like 120 yards, to be honest. When it comes to combat in general, I think if the rifle is, you know, relatively accurate up to about 300 yards, then that's pretty much it. As far as engaging past that with a sort of rifle like this, especially like 5.56 sort of you know, main rifle, I don't really think you need accuracy that's like that great beyond 300, if I'm being honest. And again, my sort of background also lies a little bit more heavily towards CQB. So I'm going to go more towards like CQB kind of shooting, which is kind of where a lot of my drills were with this particular rifle. Now, as far as the price, I think I got mine before taxes and everything for about $2,400. There is a forward ejecting model, so there's like an extra attachment here, and it ejects the casings forward, which is nice if you're going to be doing like ambidextrous shooting or what have you. But for me, I don't really do that too much, and I also just, it's a little bit iffy because it's one more thing that can kind of get messed up when it comes to the ejection, so I didn't really want to be messing with that. So for about $2,400, a little bit more pricey when it comes to like a standard sort of 5.56 rifle. But it is pretty versatile. Again, it is bullpup. There's really nothing like it. The X95 is probably the closest thing, and I've owned an X95 before, and I'll kind of talk some of that comparison as well a little bit later. But that's probably the closest thing. There's not a whole lot of solid bullpups, like completely engineered from the ground up, like the Desert Tech MDRX. Now, with that being said, of course, it's important to kind of see where is all the value in this rifle. You know, if it's $2,400, there's got to be something. It's got to be like really solid machining, really solid coatings going into it, just a lot of features that you wouldn't see on any other firearm. So we'll kind of talk about that, and we'll kind of start from the rear. So as far as the actual butt pad, really no issues. It's relatively comfortable. I'm not feeling it too much. I know with some, I don't know why, with some bullpups, I mean, it's a bullpup. You can't really change the stock out because the stock is basically the whole gun. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, yeah, you're kind of stuck with what you have. So overall, I think it's fine. It's comfortable enough. I haven't noticed it particularly, but I have noticed, you know, when I'm done shooting, I will have a little bit of a bruise, and I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's just like the angle of the buttstock, because you can kind of see it bows out ever so slightly. So maybe, you know, there's times where I just bring it a little bit too low and I'm just kind of getting beat up by that. But for the most part, again, very comfortable. Unless you're shooting like thousands of rounds in a day, you're not really gonna have any issues with that. Okay, now again, since it is a bullpup and you're kind of stuck with this whole part right here, talking about the cheek rest portion, I haven't noticed any discomforts like when I'm shooting it. I've noticed it with other firearms like the AUG or the Steyr. It's gotten a little bit uncomfortable sometimes shooting it, but with this one, I haven't really noticed that. I don't know if there's varying like heights or replacements you can get for this, or more like rubberized cushioned ones. But again, for me, I haven't noticed any issues or discomfort at all with that. Now, the ejection ports, you can see I have it set up for right-handed shooting. You can swap it out if you are left-handed. You know, there's always one of those guys, but if you guys are left-handed, the rifle is pretty well set up for being ambidextrous, so you don't really need to worry about that. And again, you do have the forward ejecting if you do want to kind of switch hands and be a little bit more ambidextrous like that. Now, as far as the actual magazine well, so we have that down here. We have our bolt catch, kind of bolt release, and then you also have the first magazine release right there. So I'll say this works relatively well. Again, with bullpups, something that I have noticed with bullpups in general is when you're really getting the rifle nice and sort of tight in your shoulder, your forearm tends to press against the magazine, which I haven't noticed any issues with feeding or anything like that, chambering. However, when you do need to reload, sometimes when you try and drop the magazine, it doesn't move until you actually move your arm. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. It's just one of those things with bullpups that you kind of end up getting used to. But as far as the actual bolt catch, so again, you can just rack it back, and then you'll notice that the actual sort of bolt release starts kind of popping out like that, which is great. So if you're trying to do a reload, you can just drop your magazine, normal sort of AR magazine release right there. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. It's not the best. But once you get your new magazine, you just insert it, and then kind of in one fluid motion, you can insert and also release the bolt, which is pretty common now for bullpups. I know the X95 has that, and it's very natural, it's very comfortable, and it's very quick. Like reloads on a bullpup, but you know, after you get used to the kind of awkwardness of kind of bringing a bullpup up and like this and trying to work this close in your workspace, the reloads can get very, very fast. And again, we do have the other magazine release right here. This one is very, very stiff, so I tend not to use it. And again, just in general, if I'm dropping the mag, usually it's for like a speed reload. or my hand's already on the pistol grip, so I would usually just end up using this magazine release. But again, you do have that available to you as well, which, I mean, again, it's nice to have sort of options. Now, the selector switch is trash. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that. There's not a whole lot of purchase. Again, it is ambidextrous. Both sides look exactly the same. There's not a whole lot of purchase. I have pretty big thumbs, so generally speaking, I like to have slightly bigger controls, just so, I don't know, it's just a little more tactile as well. But yeah, you have like very little sort of purchase with the actual selector switch. And I think the thing that irks me the most is it doesn't really like click. Like with an AR, it's very, like, for the most part, if you have like a decent AR, you understand when you've taken it off safe or fire. And with this one, it's really hard to tell. You can even hear it. It's really not that obvious. So I don't like that. I don't like that kind of weird ambiguity that, you know, is the weapon actually on fire or is it like halfway or something?
Fuck, malfunction. Good.
Taking it. Clear.
Clear.
Oh, it actually malfunctioned then, huh? What happened?
Safety was halfway.
Yeah, that selector switch sucks ass.
Yeah. There's no, it's so small.
Yeah.
You don't get the positive like click, you know, like on an
it's
HK.
Mushy. It's mushy, yeah.
Yeah, on an HK goes click, click.
Yeah. I hate it. And you get a good habit of kind of sweeping it, so you know, like you kind of hit that wall regardless, so you kind of know that it is on fire. But again, I would like it to be a little bit more tactile, you know, and kind of shit hits the fan scenarios when your senses kind of go out the window. The pistol grip, you can swap this out with other AR pistol grips, which is nice. And then with the trigger itself, it's more of like a flat face trigger, very comfortable to shoot. And I gotta say, the trigger in general for a bullpup is fantastic. Like, it's definitely one of the best bullpup. It is the best bullpup trigger that I've ever felt. I've shot the Steyr, I've shot the X95, I've shot a few different versions of the X95, even in Israel. The AUG, I've had some hands-on with the SA80, and yeah, this is just, it's a nice trigger, and I'll kind of show you that right here, sort of grand thumb style. So, finger on the trigger. Okay, so a little bit of a wall, I guess, at first, but the reset is fantastic. So you can shoot very fast with this thing, very comfortably, because very quick resets and very smooth after that. You're not really noticing the wall anymore. So yeah, for a bullpup trigger, that's great. It's better than the kind of standard military AR triggers that we have in the Marine Corps and Army. So really not a whole lot of complaints with that. Biggest complaint I would say with this overall operation, the selector switch is annoying, but the magazine release is also just really not good at all. So it is plastic, and because it's plastic, I don't know if there's just like a little more friction or what have you. I don't know, but again, it is also ambidextrous, so you have that, but it's very, very mushy and it's very hard to depress. So I'm actually like feeling it in my wrist because my finger needs to come out a little bit more to really push down on it. If I'm just like this and I try and press it, it's very kind of awkward and really not a whole lot of guarantee that it's actually gonna drop the magazine, but I really notice I almost need to like bring my finger out a lot more to really get a good press on it. It's just very stiff, and I've tried to put like some CLP, even like WD-40, and it hasn't really helped a whole lot. So not a huge fan of that either. Now, something that a lot of people are complaining about is the handguard, and that's because it's a polymer handguard. And it makes sense. I understand where the complaints are coming from. So of course, when you have something like a PEC 15 like we have here, or anything that needs to retain a zero, it's not ideal to put it on something that's polymer because again, you do have the ability to lose that zero a little bit quicker, which is not going to be ideal, especially if you're trying to take any sort of precise shots. Now, I would say in general, especially kind of like under low lights, no light scenarios where you're really relying on your laser, to get some of those more precise shots, especially in CQB, it's, you know, that you might only have like a piece of somebody showing from behind the wall or doorway. So you will be having to take some more accurate shots. Again, it's not going to be as much of an issue, but that's not something you want to be worrying about at all. You want to have that fidelity of 0 at the very least, so you can kind of rely on this thing actually shooting where you have zeroed your optics to actually go. So there are aftermarket handguards you can get, and those are pretty solid. Again, it's just a consideration considering you don't have a whole lot of rail space. I mean, you just have like right here to right here. So not a whole lot of rail space, especially if you're trying to have an EOTech with a magnifier, or, you know, something with a little bit different eye relief. Now with my PEC, I haven't really noticed any loss of 0 at all. Ever since day one, it's been fine, but you can see mine is sort of mounted on the metal receiver and also kind of the extension coming off of the gas block there. So I haven't noticed any issues. I haven't mounted it directly onto the handguard, so maybe that's why, but I'm not sure. I haven't really tested it on the handguard as well. But again, just something else to consider. But as far as rail space is concerned, again, I have my Magpul backup sights. It's got plenty of room for that. I have the PEC. Set up in a way where I can actually feed the pressure pads in a comfortable position without having the wire get too jacked up or what have you. And then of course I have room for my EOTech and my Surefire. So I will say the actual M-LOK gaps, so you have kind of the row right here, but then you also have like an offset, like 45-degree kind of slots right there. And those are nice as well. So it's nice to have options. You can kind of see that's what I did with my pressure pad. Now, of course, you can just have the PEC and flashlights feed into the same pressure pad. But for me, I just like having the delineation between this is a flashlight and this is a laser. So I don't really mind having the 2 pressure pads. And again, I have room for it, which is nice. And then moving to the barrel, again, it is threaded, so you can put your muzzle devices and suppressors on, which I have, and it works great because it also has an adjustable gas plug or gas regulator, which you kind of have access to with this little window right here. It's a little bit finicky, but you can actually get into it relatively easily. I think I just used like a 5.56 round, and I was able to kind of adjust that. No issues, which I did have to do. And here in the Pacific Northwest, it rains a lot, and with the suppressor, I was getting some feeding issues. It was more of actually extraction and ejection issues. I kept having the brass get stuck inside, so it just wasn't kicking it out as powerfully as it could. So I just adjusted that. No issues whatsoever. I haven't had a single malfunction ever since I did that, which is great. So as far as mounting a suppressor on this thing, you're not really gonna have any issues, and having that adjustable gas plug is great, especially for some of those more adverse conditions or what have you. Now, as far as mounting a sling, you do have, again, the rail. If you want to have like a sling mount kind of attached to the rail, you do have that option. For me, I kind of just went like the ghetto route, if you will, and I just put the sling loop around the handguard, which works fine. I don't imagine that polymer should break or even abrade the sling mount at all. But really, what the concern is with the sling mounting is this piece right here. So this is actually a male and female end, and it takes the quick detach mount. So I can show you that right here. So here's my quick detach sling mount. You can put it on both sides, which is cool, like cool idea in theory. However, I think after only shooting about 300 rounds, this piece completely separated like from both sides. And I'll show you a picture. There's really not a whole lot of thread purchase at all. Really, really terrible design, if I'm being honest. I don't know why they made it so small of a thread, because it's very easy for that shit to break. And that really kind of peeved me. Paying $2,400 for a weapon, and after like 300 rounds, that part breaks, completely separates to the point where, I mean, my sling was completely off like here because this entire part separated, fell out of the gun. And also, another really interesting design feature, if you want to call it that, this piece actually keeps the upper receiver and lower receiver kind of connected right here. So if you don't have this, there's kind of a little bit of a gap that starts coming up, which I don't really want my gun to be separating because of one component, one really, really weak component that's also used to keep the sling attached. So the sling ended up detaching, And luckily I was still holding it with both hands. But if I was doing anything like rappelling, if I was just trying to, you know, mess with a casualty or an occupant and I was trying to sling this thing, you don't want this thing to be separating right here to the point where your sling is off your body and this weapon is just taking a tumble. You know, if you're rappelling, this thing could potentially be dropping like 60, 70 feet, and whatever you have on it, suppressor, I mean, even if you're like at standing height, if the sling falls off and it lands on the suppressor the wrong way and bends that, or again, you just break one of your expensive optics, you're gonna be kind of pissed off. So that's just a terrible design. I don't know why they did that, and they really should have a way to kind of beef this up. At least just change like the thread size. But when they send the replacement part, it was the exact same. So I'm using it as a sling mount, but I'm also looking at different options, which there's not a whole lot of options. Unless I mount to the sling here, that is a possibility, but I don't really have enough room. And just trying to put something around here, I don't want to do, because again, you have the bolt release. Yeah, you kind of screwed on options. So just a terrible design. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It really aggravated me. And again, luckily I was holding it and nothing, you know, I didn't just drop the weapon completely, because that would have been really annoying, especially if I, you know, dropped it on the suppressor that I waited 9 months for. So that's where we sort of move more into the build quality. Again, overall, everything else has been fine. I haven't had any issues with anything else breaking or anything else getting snagged up. So build quality is okay. Fit and finish is all right. The pins can be a little bit kind of a pain in the ass to get out every now and again, and even to seat, but no issues there. Charging handle feels very, very sturdy. I even feel comfortable doing like the HK slap, which you can do, which is pretty cool. So all you have to do for that is rack it, sort of lock it up right there. And then you can get your magazine. If I had a round, it would work fine, but let's pretend I have a round in there. And then just hit it down and you're good to go, which kind of cool. I mean, I do have an MP5 and I do kind of like that aesthetic as far as like the manual of arms, if you will. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool. I guess it really depends on what you want to do and how you actually want to reload it, and also which is faster. So yeah, that's a pretty cool little feature. But overall, again, the build quality is pretty solid. I haven't had any issues with really anything except for this just janky design feature. Now again, we talked a little bit about the uses, but this is just a great CQB weapon. Like moving it through the house, it's just so easy, even with the suppressor. Now I will say, it is pretty heavy of a weapon. The base rifle, I think, is a little bit over 7 pounds. And then of course, when you add the backup sights, the EOTech, the PEC, the flashlight, and the suppressor, I think actually right now it's really balanced pretty well, because generally it'll be a little bit more back heavy when it comes to bullpups. But with all this kind of stuff, I think it's balanced very, very well. So as far as like actually, you know, maneuvering this thing around, it's really not bad at all anymore. It's kind of like with night vision, how you have the night vision on, but because it kind of throws off your balance, it kind of messes up your neck a little bit. So you have to have more weight in the back. And I think kind of it's a similar approach here in a weird way, where it's balanced out and it's not too bad. But again, it is pretty heavy. I think right now we're probably sitting at, I don't know, maybe like 10 and a half, 11 pounds. There's a lot of stuff on here. Fully loaded, again, it's going to be kind of adding to that. Now for me, it's not too bad. However, I know if I'm going to be kind of walking long distances with this thing, I will definitely start to feel it, especially whenever this sling mount breaks and then I'm just having to carry it with my arms. I'm going to keep going back to that. Yeah, I don't think it's that heavy, to be honest. At least in the ways that I use it, it's not going to be too bad. However, if you are trying to go pretty lengthy distances with this thing slung on your shoulders, or again, you're just having to carry it, not going to be as fun for sure. Yeah, that'll definitely start to be pretty taxing on your traps. I'm not sure if you guys can see or not, but it is chambered. It says multi-caliber, but it is chambered for .223 Remington 5.56, which is pretty cool to have all that kind of versatility in using some different ammunition. Again, kind of just depending on what kind of uses you're trying to put this thing through. Now, as far as accuracy, I would say it's comparable to any of the other rifles I have. Even with all the other rifles I have, I only really shoot them out to about 150 meters, because it's more CQB kind of oriented shooting. But I know if I do need to shoot this to like 300, even 400, 500 yards, I'm really not going to be concerned at all. The accuracy is there, it's fine. And I don't really have a focus or desire to shoot much further than kind of what I'm doing right now. But something to consider if you're going to be shooting it for further distances, maybe check out somebody else's review where they're kind of really putting it out to further distances and kind of see how it compares there. But I mean, my groupings up to 100 yards have been great. No issues at all. And again, just comparable to everything else that I own already. Now, finishing up on sort of reliability and issues. Again, ever since I had the gas regulator adjusted, it's been fine. No issues there whatsoever. So it's been pretty much taking all the ammo that I'm putting through it and just spitting it out. No issues whatsoever. No issues with using it with the suppressor. Again, my Zero has been fine. It's maintained itself very fine on the PEC and the EOTech. No issues there. And yeah, again, the only thing that I can think of is just the awkwardness of having a bullpup. Once you get past that, you're all right. But again, things to consider whenever you're kind of like trying to really push the weapon into your shoulder and you're kind of pushing on that magazine a little bit. So sometimes the reloads can be a little bit finicky. You'll see a lot in my videos a lot where I have to just rip the magazine out and then reload it, which is not that big of a deal. And maybe I should just get used to kind of doing the MP5 reloads. But I don't know. Again, you do have some options at least, but you kind of just have to find what works best for you. And lastly, the only other thing that I've noticed that I do sometimes is when I am reinserting the magazine, sometimes because I got pretty freaking massive hands, sometimes I'll actually release the bolts before the magazine is fully seated. So you do have to be cognizant of that. Just make sure it's in, and then that was still also kind of bad. Make sure it's, I just have big hands. I have like really crazy hitchhiker thumbs too. So maybe I should just like utilize that so it's not like as far up. Man, that's gnarly on camera. So yeah, up and then release. So almost like a two-stage thing, which isn't ideal. You kind of want to just do it in one fluid motion, but just be cognizant of that. You might not actually chamber a round. But yeah, overall, I think it's a great rifle, very versatile, very reliable, accurate. Again, there's some weird quirks here and there. Some quirks just with it being a bullpup, and then some other things that's just weird design kind of issue, and I kind of hope they change that relatively soon. Same with the selector switch and also the magazine release. But again, that trigger, fantastic. The charging handle, again, how you can kind of use that like MP5 style, again, great. You do have a decent amount of rail space, but again, also kind of the polymer handguard. You do have some aftermarket accessories and options available for you. Not as much as I think I would like, but again, it is fine. So I think you can tailor it to whatever kind of purpose you're trying to use it for. For CQB, it'll be fine. For sort of recce setup, again, I think it'd be great as well. Just again, consider the kind of weight of the weapon itself and kind of what you're going to be putting onto it. But overall, again, multi-caliber, short, compact. It just looks freaking very cool, very unique. Not a whole lot of things compared to it. So if you're just not trying to be one of those AR guys, which, I mean, being an AR guy is actually kind of cool. So I wouldn't necessarily say that's a motivation. But if you're trying to look for some different options, maybe you just have a bunch of ARs already, you're trying to find something similar, but also just unique, I think this is a great option. Compared to my X95, X95 was solid. I think it was pretty convenient to mount things onto the X95, and it also did come with its, although very janky, it did come with like its own kind of backup sights, so that was cool. But as far as like the smooth shooting, I think this thing shoots a lot smoother, a little bit more reliable, not much more reliable, but more pleasant to shoot, especially with a suppressor as well. I do like how the barrel kind of just ends like right past the handguard as well. Makes it a little bit easier to kind of maneuver around like doors and door frames, moving it inside of a CQB environment. And I think in general, the ergonomics are just definitely far superior on the Desert Tech. That's definitely for sure. So yeah, overall, pretty solid weapon. If you guys are considering it, definitely try and get it at a good price. It is a pretty hefty price. It starts moving into like HK, even like SCAR prices. but it's about on par with prices you would see with like manufacturers like POF or LMT. So as far as like looking for comparisons, as far as the price range, you do have a lot of options in that price range. So it's really trying to figure out if it fits whatever kind of niche role or I guess even aesthetic you're trying to work with. But I think it is solid. I don't know if I would necessarily choose this over like a normal AR because that's kind of what I was bred on. I'd probably go with an AR. But I am trying to work this as my primary setup now, and I think it's going all right. And again, I am kind of appreciating the bullpup nature of it just being a little bit shorter. But let me know what you guys think. If there's anything that you want to see in the gun reviews in general, I'll try and facilitate that. I know an accuracy test is kind of a standard, but again, for me, a lot of the shooting I do, the accuracy, unless it's just god awful, which I haven't seen in anything that I've purchased yet, unless it's just awful, I'm not really going to have a whole lot to comment on because, I mean, you're going to get very decent groupings when you're shooting within 200 yards. I mean, you should be getting groupings like that at the very least. So, and that's kind of what I was getting with this one. So if there's anything else you guys want to see added to this, I'll try and have some clips here and there so you guys can see more of the shooting as well. But if there's anything, let me know down in the comment section, and I'll try and facilitate that in the future gun reviews. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think in general. If you guys want to see anything else related to kind of gun stuff, or if you have any questions on the Desert Tech, let me know as well. But that's it for this video. I'll see you all in the next one.